That okay? Talk more.
Okay, Erev Tov. So as we know, Purim is fast approaching, nearly here. And I want to talk a little bit about something in the Megillah tonight. When you look at the story of Megillat Esther, so it doesn't take much to realize that there is a lot in the story that is hidden. There is a lot that is not there. There is a lot that is maybe hinted to, that is not quite apparent. It's not there at first glance, second glance either. The very name of the Megillah we know means, Megillah, interesting, Megillah is to reveal, Megaleh, but Esther is that which is hidden. Her very, very name is, there's a machloket in the Gemara, was Esther really her name? Or was her name Hadassah? Was it something else? But the word Esther means that it's hidden. So the whole Megillah is an idea that there's something hidden here beneath the surface. We know that the name of Hashem does not appear, not even once, explicitly in the Megillah. Chazal tell us there are hints towards it. Every time when it says Hamelech, right? Sometimes it says Hamelech Achashverosh. We know it's referring clearly to Achashverosh. When it says Hamelech, just Stam, so Chazal tell us there is a hint to Kadosh Baruch Hu as well, and other places where it's hidden. And we find this throughout. I mean, we know we have midrashim throughout Tanakh, but there seems to be an extra level of secrecy, of hiddenness, which appears within the Megillah. For example, pasuk which is familiar to all of us, we say it every week, Haftarah, right? He was asking me earlier about Simcha, why Simcha is so dominant in Purim. But Orav v'Simcha v'Sason v'Ikar, and tell us Chazal, what does that mean? It means not what it says, it's all a code, right? Orah is Torah, Simcha is Yom Tov, Sason and Ikar is Brit Milah and Tefillin, etc. So all sorts of things which are hidden, which are not revealed explicitly. So, and as a result of that, there are many parts of the story which take place, many conversations which take place between the characters, which are not written in the Megillah, but we know them from Chazal, we know them from the Midrashim, we know them from the Gemara. So one conversation that takes place after the Purim story has finished, it's very interesting. The Gemara says that after Purim, before they put this book down, maybe before they had it as part of the canon, so the Gemara says that Esther sent to the sages, and she said to them, Kva'uni ledorot, right, establish me for the generations. Write down my story. Write down the book of Esther. Take this Megillah and make it part of the Tanakh, part of the canon. And there's a little bit of a back and forth. It wasn't so simple to get Esther included as part of one of the books. Right? It says, the Gemara, Esther says, Kva'uni ledorot, establish me for all generations. And it says they sent back to her, sure, no, that's not what they said. They said, we can't do that. They said, we can't do that. Kinat me'olelet aleinu bein ha'omot. We're going to tell the story, it's going to cause anti-Semitism. We're going to tell the story, it's going to cause jealousy. It's going to cause hatred. Why? We're going to tell the story how the Jews, defeated these the Amalekites, how it went against not only that, but it's going against the kingdom. You look at Achashverosh, and he ends up looking like he doesn't look so great when you think of the story of how it went. Doesn't make such a good impression. Says we're going to tell the story about how the Jews came out, and we don't want to emphasize the difference. We don't want to emphasize what happened to us. We're still in Galut, right? One of the reasons, mentioned last week, one of the reasons why we don't say Halal on Purim. Let's mention another one, right? So the Gemara says that at the end of the story, Akati avdei Achashverosh ana, meaning at the end of the story, yes, we were saved, but we're still in Galut. We're still servants to Achashverosh. He's still the king. The last few verses in the Megillah emphasize this point, right? It says that Achashverosh placed a tax, placed a mass, right? And everybody boos at that point, in addition to booing at Haman. So it's not perfect. We're still in Galut. We still need to keep our heads down. We don't want to make a big noise. We don't want to have this story being published, etc. So then Esther says back to the Chachamim, she says, wait a minute, you don't have to worry, because the story's already written down. It's already there in the history books, in the books of Maariv of Paras, right? They've already got it there. They know what happened. They've got the whole story's already public. You're not going to add any more kinah. And that's what the Gemara says. That's how it's a little bit of a strange argument, conversation going on here. And it seems to be that what was Esther telling the Chachamim, and what were the Chachamim saying back, and what did they accepted what she said. In other words, originally Esther says, write down my story, write down the book. And the Chachamim turn back and they say, we don't want to add another book of the Tanakh. We don't want to, make the differences so obvious to everybody. Esther says, don't worry, it's already written in the history books. So the Chachamim say, okay, we'll accept what you're saying, Esther. In other words, what she's saying is write it down in a way. Write down my story. Write this book of Megillat Esther, not in the way that you would have written all the other books of Tanakh, not in the way that everything else. Write it in a way that looks like the books of Madai Paras. Write it in a way that everything is hidden. Write it in a way that it won't expose, that it won't cause this kinah and bein ha'omot, etc. But everything's written in such a way that it's all a sort of code. It's sort of hidden, and that's why we don't have to worry, because everybody else will see the story. It's the same story that they're seeing in the history books. That's what they'll see. But we want to know the real story, so we have Chazal, we have the Gemara, we have the Midrashim, we have the Torah Sheba'al Peh, and we'll fill it in. We'll fill in all those details today by knowing in the Torah Sheba'al Peh. So, for example, I mentioned how things are hidden. One of the things most obvious when you think about it, right? Haman comes to Achashverosh, and he says, "I want to destroy the Jewish people," right? But it doesn't say that. You look in the Psukim. What does it say? There is a certain nation out there. Which nation? It doesn't say. Obviously, now. Even he told him, and he knew, and Chazal say in the Midrashim that Achashverosh was just as interested as Haman in destroying the Jewish people. Chazal tell us, they give a mashal. They say you have two people. Right? One has got a mound of dirt in his field, and the other one has got a ditch in his field. So you want to take the mound from the one, and you want to fill up the ditch, and then everybody's happy. He says that was Achashverosh and Haman. That's how they were. Both of them had this interest that Achashverosh was a wicked king, and he was just as interested in destroying the Jewish people as Haman. When you read the story of the Megillah, you don't get that impression. It doesn't seem to be that obvious. That match is hidden, because if it was obvious and if it was written in such a straightforward manner, so what would it mean? Look at Achashverosh. How does he? It looks bad enough in the story as it is, but you would say, okay, so he's this anti-Semite. He wants to destroy the Jewish people, and Haman's telling him, and they're in it together, and he has this plan. And all of a sudden, for no reason, Esther comes along. Okay, he changes his mind. He says yes. He says no. It makes him look like a very doesn't make him look great. But the way that the story is written, so he didn't know who it was, and it was all hidden. And then all of a sudden, he discovers something. Okay, once he discovers, he puts someone as him hanged, and that's the story. So that is one idea. And there's another very interesting, many of these conversations which are hidden, which are sort of encoded within the Megillah. But there's a conversation that takes place between Mordechai and Esther. When, right at the beginning, already in the 4th chapter, so not the very beginning, but once Mordechai hears of Haman's plan, and he goes and he sits in sackcloth and ashes by the palace, right? And Esther sends to find out what's going on. She sends a message. They have this dialogue between Esther and Mordechai. And it says that Esther sends a message to Mordechai in order to find out, Ladat mazeh v'al mazeh. What is this and what is this about? That's the language of the pasuk. Ladat mazeh v'al mazeh. She wants to find out what's going on. Mordechai, what are you doing? What are you doing? What's bothering you? What? So the Gemara says, again, the Gemara Megillah, in these dapim, which I go through and dash in many of the different psukim of the Megillah, the words mazeh are related to, we find in Chumash, a couple of places actually, but where we have a very similar language. So when the Torah was given, when the Luchot are given, it says that the words of the Aseret HaDibrot, the words that are written on the Luchot are inscribed on both sides of the tablets. It says mizeh u'mizeh hem ktuvim. Right, so you have mazeh, mizeh. It's very similar. So says the Gemara that Esther sent to Mordechai. She sent him a message. And she said, maybe all of this has happened. Why? Because Shema Avru Chamisha Chumshei Torah. Maybe the Jewish people have transgressed. Maybe they have not fulfilled the words of the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, which are Mizeh, where it says, Shneimar, Mizeh u'mizeh hem ktuvim. Right? The Mizeh u'mizeh, which is written in the Torah when Moshe Rabbeinu receives the tablets, that the Luchot, that is similar. Those words, Mizeh u'mizeh, is similar to the mazeh v'al mazeh in the pasuk. So 2 questions over here. Number 1, why does she say specifically, what is this language of Shema Avraham Chamisha Chumshei Torah? right? Not just they transgress something, and they transgress the entirety of Torah, all 5 chumashim. That is an interesting language. But more than that, what is the connection? Okay, mazeh, valmazeh, mizeh, mizeh. It's the same word, very nice. But what does it mean? Is there a deeper message behind the fact that the luchot were inscribed on both sides, and the fact that she's now sending this message to Mordechai? So the Be'er Yosef, Rav Yosef Salant, in his Sefer, he explains the following idea. And he said, we'll start it. I'm not sure if we'll finish today. We'll start. We'll see how much we get through. And if necessary, we'll carry on tomorrow. But let's go back to the beginning of the story where all this happens. As I said, much of the Megillah is hidden. Most of the actual story is not written in the story, right? And the beginning of the story is, why did all of this happen? Why were the Jewish people in such a precarious position that there was a decree of death and destruction for every single last Jew? What did we do to deserve this? So the Gemara Megillah asked, it says that the Talmidim of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai asked him this question. It's interesting, by the way, this Chazal relates to this idea twice. It's in the Gemara in Megillah, and it's also in the Midrash in Shiur Shiurim. And who was saying, there are 2 answers which are given. Who was saying which answer is switched around in the 2 different versions. But in any event, so they asked Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and they said, why? Why were Bnei Israel deserving of this decree of destruction in the days of Purim? So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai answers them, and he says, well, you tell me, what do you think? So the answer number 1 is, we mentioned it last week as well, right? Because they went to the feast, because they went to Achashverosh's big party. What exactly was the problem about the fact that they went? So I mentioned last week as well, according to some, there are those who say the food there wasn't kosher, what they ate wasn't kosher, or that it was bishul akum. But there are certain opinions that say that. There are others who say no, everything they ate was kosher. Don't have to worry about that. It was kirtonish va'esh. But the fact that they went to the party, the fact that, and again, what was that celebrating? The Gemara tells us this is also not written in the Megillah, because we understand this would also morer kina bein ha'umot. That the fact that Achashverosh was celebrating what he thought was the time of the Geulah had come and it had not happened. So he gets out the kelim of the Beit HaMikdash, and he gets the big day kahuna, the Kohen Gadol, and that's all going on. And the Jews are part of that, and they voluntarily chose to be there at this party, which is celebrating the downfall of the Jewish people. That's not appropriate. Anyway, says the Gemara, okay, that satisfies, that answer is satisfactory to explain why the Jews of Shushan should be punished. But what about everybody else? In those days, it took a long time to get from one place to another, right? The Jews who were not in Shushan, why were they punished? The Gemara says there's a second answer. Answer number two is the fact that that earlier on in the days of Nebuchadnezzar, that they bowed down to an idol. So says the Gemara, no. Those were there where they were bowing down to an idol, they didn't really mean it. It says they just did it sort of to appease. They did it beke'ilu, right? They did it to pretend so that they wouldn't look too bad. So it says okay, they just pretended. So it says okay, Kadosh Baruch Hu also just pretended. Meaning they didn't. In the end of the day, they weren't killed, but that was one. So those are the 2 reasons. Says the Gemara that either because they enjoyed from because they were part of this feast, or because they had gone and they had they had bowed down to the sign. What is the root? Whichever explanation we take, why did they get? Why did they get to this point? Why were they acting in such a way that was going to allow them to face this terrible decree of destruction? So says Rabbi Yosef Salant, and he says we'll just start. He says that maybe they said to themselves the following. They said, now we're in Shushan. Now we're in, this is what's going on. There's this party which is going on. So another important piece which Chazal fill in is that Mordechai sent a cruise. He told them all not to go. It's not just that they went and they asked the Rabbanim. If they asked the Rabbanim at the time, they would have told them don't go. Mordechai told them don't go to the Suda. But he says maybe they said to themselves the following. They said, back when we were in Eretz Yisrael, back when we had the Beit HaMikdash, back when we were independent, back when all those things, we had the Torah. We would have kept Kalaka B'Chamorah. We would have kept everything. We wouldn't have dared to try to change or to do something. Nowadays, we're still going to keep most of it. We still keep most of things, but maybe we don't have to be as from. Maybe we don't have to be. There are certain things which no longer apply. maybe there are certain elements of this which are not relevant. Kosher food, very, very important. But there's a situation whereby there's going to be a feast. We're going to offend the kingdom. We're going to offend the government. We need to go and we need to do it. We shouldn't go there. There's an issur in the Torah of Letzelem. We don't want to offend people too much. We're going to. Maybe there was a thought. This is the beginning. This is the root of saying that not everything that was in the Torah that once upon a time was kept was relevant. Maybe now there's a certain lack of it. Maybe it is less necessary. Maybe it's less relevant. Okay, and how does all this tie in to the idea of mizeh mizem ksuvim? And this is where we will get back to mazeh va'am mazeh. So that will carry on tomorrow. Rabbi Hanania ben Akash אומר, "Tzakadosh Baruch Hu lezakot et Yisrael, lefichach hu b'aleim Torah mitzvot, shneimar